some irrelevant. That's the reason why we are lagging extremely behind in terms of what we should have covered. So anyways, that's all right, fine. I've also apologized to somebody whose query, I don't know, somehow I don't remember the name of this person, but the chat has got somehow deleted, or I don't know, I can't find that chat. So whatever queries you all have, please feel free to, post them on WhatsApp, and I will try to address as much as possible. Let them be relevant, but so that's about it. And on that note, without wasting any time, I want to start immediately with the class today. So our syllabus is basically bifurcated into two. It's commercial law, and then it is the shipping laws. Okay. So far what we have been doing were the commercial laws. And I had also told you all that commercial law, although the chapters may be, less in number when you look at the syllabus, but commercial law, the chunk, of the syllabus is pretty more, and it is the base, because even if it is commercial law, it is something that is applicable in shipping law also, because shipping also is a commercial activity. Correct. So we have spent a lot of time on commercial law, which was worth it, because all those laws that we have studied, we have studied water contractors, we have spoken about special contracts like guarantee and agency and indemnity and bailment, and all of these are extremely relevant to the shipping business also. We spoke about the Sale of Goods Act and all of that, and therefore yes, 60% of our syllabus gets covered by the commercial laws, and the remaining 40% that we have to do in the next two classes, that is today and the last class. We will be speaking in particular about shipping laws. So there will be laws, there will be concepts that we will be speaking about, and not necessarily that everything that we are going to speak about is going to be an act like it was in the commercial laws. Everything was an act, and we were discussing acts over there. Here we would be discussing certain acts, but we would also be discussing certain concepts which would be useful for from the legal perspectives, if we have to understand the shipping laws. So what we are going to start today are the shipping laws, and I am sure you will be more interested and more intrigued in listening to what some of the shipping laws say, what are some of the provisions of the shipping law. Again, like I said, concept. I hope you can hear me now, huh?
Yes, madam, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So because what happens is when I plug in both my ears, I find my volume low. But anyways, good. So there are a lot of you all sitting over here in this room along with me who have been, working in the shipping industry. Some of you all are having good experience of a long service in the shipping industry. And so there are certain things that I may come back to you and I may, check with you if, what this is right, or what I am talking about, what the law prescribes is right. Are there any amendments in particularly about those things and things like that? Okay. So if we look at the shipping laws, what is it that we are going to actually cover in the shipping laws? Is we will be starting with the Indian COXA, that is Carriage of Goods by Sea Act, which we may not be doing in depth because you're doing that act again next year. Okay, so we'll be starting with that. Then we will be speaking about the ports, Indian Ports Act, and then we'll be speaking about the major ports and what are some of the provisions that have been laid down in the Major Ports Act. We will be speaking about the Inland Vessels Act. We're speaking about the Indian Lighthouse Act. We will be speaking about freight. We will be speaking about maritime Lian will be speaking about freight, I said. We will be speaking about lighthouse also, I said. We'll be speaking about, yes, arbitration. Why arbitration is the most preferred mode of settlement of dispute. We'll be talking about that. And then there would be some one or two more topics, perhaps, which I must have missed. But yes, that is it. So very quickly, let us start with the Indian COXA now, that is Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act. I will start sharing my screen. Okay. Can we see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
The
you so
Indian
much.
carriage of goods by sea.
Yes, yes. So most of the shipping laws or most of the maritime laws, where have they actually come from? So what used to happen is, as shipping industry started booming, or as the shipping industry started taking, becoming a major commercial activity, and it is a major commercial activity. We know how it is. So disturbing, yeah. And we know how it
Muted,
is.
madam, muted.
We know how it is. How it plays a very important role. The shipping business plays a very important role worldwide in transferring the goods, transporting whatever goods or passenger from one end to other. All see business activity mainly. Majorly business activity takes place where there's import and export that is happening, and where goods are sent from one port to another port. It could be ports within the country, it could be ports outside the country. So it's not just import and export, it's also internally in the country. So it plays a very, very important role, and it's a huge business. It's a business of billions and trillions and all of that. And therefore understanding. So what used to happen? Yeah, I was telling you how the laws are framed. So what used to happen is, everything started evolving. The business started evolving. When the business started evolving, at that point of time, perhaps there were no laws, there were no acts or anything like that. But what happened was then, people, since it was a worldwide business, like India is exporting goods to so many other countries, and so many other countries are likewise exporting goods to India and so many other countries. There were certain places where they felt, and then every country had their own laws. So then there used to be certain cases where they used to feel that some common sort of decisions need to be taken. There has to be some unification in way of doing the business across the globe, and that is the reason why people from this industry started coming together for certain reasons, certain purposes. They started coming together, and then they started brainstorming basically. And after brainstorming, they started actually setting certain rules, certain regulations, certain pointers where people who have attended that brainstorming sessions would adhere to those points that were raised in the question. They would adhere to the rules and regulations that were framed in that brainstorming sessions. Now, how would these brainstorming sessions happen? These brainstorming sessions basically would happen in form of a conference, where a conference would be held for a particular purpose, where people will come together and people will discuss that, yes, these are the issues that we need to actually consider while doing shipping business. And based on that, then they would start people, like-minded people, or people who wanted to take advantage. And advantage, I'm not meaning in the negative way. Who wanted to take right advantage to do the business properly and see to it that there is no rights or liabilities of anybody are infringed. they used to come together. So there used to be country representatives. So people from India, they would form one sort of a group who are experts in, that kind of, or who are doing that business, are also who understand the difficulties in doing that business. They should all come together in a conference, which used to be known as a convention. And in that convention, certain rules and regulations would be passed. So most of the maritime acts that we are going to speak about this year, and you all will be speaking about next year, because next year there's somebody else who addresses that, the law of sea transport. So most of the maritime acts have come from the discussions in these conventions. Okay, and here what we are going to speak about now is, we're saying the name is the Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act, but this Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act is also adopted from a convention. So we are going to look at which convention it has been adopted from, and so on and so forth now. So the first purpose, let us see, the purpose of enacting the Indian Carriage of Goods Act by Sea was to establish uniform rules for the liabilities and rights of the sea carrier. The sea carrier is carrying tons and tons of cargo, which goes in crores and crores of rupees. And therefore, there need to be certain rules with regards to liabilities and also rights of the sea carrier. It is not that because the cargo is damaged, or because something went wrong with the ship, the entire liability goes on the sea carrier. Initially, it used to be like that, but then the sea carriers also had their own points to convince that it is not like that. We also have certain limitations to take care of the cargo, and therefore all these brainstormings and all that. So in which convention, or on what rules was this act formed? So this act is based on the Hague rules, and these rules form a part of the schedule of the act. So what happened? What are these Hague rules? So in the year 1924, the Hague Rules, formerly the International Convention for the Unification of Certain Rules of Law relating to Bills of Lading and Protocol of Signature. This is an international convention which happened at Hague to impose minimum standards upon commercial carriers of goods by sea. So people who were doing commercial business and the business of commercial activities of transporting goods from one port to another, they came together at Hague in the year 1924 to see to it that certain minimum standards are imposed on commercial carriers of goods by sea. Because sometimes it used so happen that the shippers used to take advantage, but most of the times it used to so happen that the also the carriers, carriers or the representatives of the carriers would take advantage of this, and they used to do certain things which would, basically not be right to the shippers, or it would be sometimes it would be, it would be unfair to the shippers. Okay, so the Hague Convention, that is International Convention for Unification of Certain Rules of Law relating to Bills of Lading and Protocol of Signature. This convention happened in Hague in 1924, and based on the rules that were formed in this Hague Convention, the Indian Carriage of Goods Act by Sea was formulated in 1925. So now when this act was formulated in 1925, the Hague rules were picked up as it is and placed as a schedule to this act. So most of the acts, let me tell you, most of the acts, whether it is shipping acts or it is any other, civil acts or any other criminal acts or any acts, would have something known as a schedule, which defines certain things more in detail. Most of the acts would also have something known as rules. The Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act may not have it, but you will have certain things like companies, like we have the, if you say the Companies Act of 1952, then there would be the Companies Rule of 1952 along with the Act. Now these rules are actually basically how you would make use of the provisions in practice. So that is what has been defined there. So here in this act, the Hague rules are picked up as it is, and they become or form a part of the schedule of the act. Okay. But the name of the act is Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act 1925. We will see why the name is Indian Carriage of Goods Act, because this act is specific to India, and we will see in the next slide what it is. Okay, so this act has only 7 sections. Okay? There are only 7 sections that are there in this act. The first section, or the first thing is, it defines, it talks about the name of the act, which is the Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act, popularly known as COCSA. Okay, and it was formulated in 1925 based on the Hague rules. Now, why India? The question is in this second point. Goods should be carried from any port within India to any port within or outside India. Okay, so the port of loading must be India. Only if the port of loading is India, then the Indian Carriage of Goods Act 1925 will hold good for that particular transaction. If somebody is loading goods in Japan and sending it to India or any other country, the Indian COCSA will not be applicable, because this is only for outward, transport or of carriage of goods. Okay, carriage within the port is also not covered under the act. So it should be one port to another port nationally, that is within India, or it should be carried from one port in India to any other port in any other country. So before the Hague rules, there was something known as common law. Okay? And most of these, we've also seen in our commercial activities, mainly mainly all the laws have been adopted from the, or have been formulated or are based on the English laws. Now here also, when we going to speak about the maritime law, there would be certain English laws that were there, or there were certain conventions which were also held internationally, mainly in Europe, and maybe sometimes in some American countries, but mainly most of the conventions were also held in Europe, and based on those conventions, the laws were formed. So common law for carriage of goods by sea was there initially, and which demanded for a seaworthy vessel. Okay, it said that the vessel has to be seaworthy. If obviously that is it, nobody will say that the vessel should. If it is not a seaworthy vessel, it is all right, because why would somebody want to send your goods or transport goods by a vessel which is not seaworthy? So there are certain, so the common law demanded that the vessel should be seaworthy. That is, it should be able to ferry across the sea, in the best of manner. It should be able to carry the cargo, or the cargo that is carried by a vessel should be taken care of appropriately and all of that. Okay. Complete seaworthiness was the clause that was there in common law. But the COCSA, or the Indian COCSA, binds the carriers to merely exercise due diligence. Now, what do we understand by due diligence? Due diligence is basically a term of audit. So when we speak about due diligence, what it actually means is that it is the responsibility of the carrier to see that everything that is required for the vessel to be seaworthy is in place. Okay, so some examples of seaworthiness are if uh, if the vessel is carrying particular kind of goods which requires a certain a degree of temperature, or a certain portion of the vessel to have certain degree of temperature, then that is there or not. That temperature is maintained in that way or not. If it is a bunker, or if it's an oil tanker or something, then whether all the provisions of carrying oil and seeing that there will not be any kind of spillage or something like that, that has been taken care of. These are some of the examples. Some of you all would probably be able to give more and better examples in this. We would be happy to read them, see them, get them in the chat and see them and read them in the chats. So that is what due diligence would be. Due diligence is that the carrier or the carrier's representatives would see to it that everything that the ship requires, for taking the cargo to from one port to another port in the safest manner is there. So it would also require certain quality of furniture and fixture, your, what you call them, your berths, no, what are those racks or whatever, where the cargo is going to be stored. They should be of good quality, where they would be actually able to store them there, because when we speak about cargo, uh, there are goods of all sorts that are sent by sea, correct? There would be fragile goods that are going, there would be perishable goods that are going, and a lot of other things are there that would be going. And in that situation, whether the vessel is able to carry all those kinds of goods in the best of manner and deliver them to the port where the shipper intends it to be delivered. That is due diligence. So Toxa will bind the carrier. Now, who is the carrier and all of that? We will be seeing it is going to come in the next slide. But it binds the carrier merely to exercise due diligence. Okay. Now, what sort of goods are would become a subject matter of this act? So, carriage of goods evidenced by bills of lading. Okay. So, first and the foremost, only goods that are being sent by bills of lading as a document, okay, those goods will stand a chance of becoming a subject of this act. And also, not all cargo or not all goods that are evidenced by mere bill of lading, that only if that bill of lading contains a clause that states that the bill of lading is subject to the provisions of the Hague Rules. This in particularly needs to be mentioned. Only those bills of lading which has a mention of this clause will be a subject matter of the COXA. That is, if something goes wrong, if the goods are lost, or if the goods are damaged, or if the goods are destroyed, deteriorated, what will be seen as per the COXA, for the shippers to claim that loss has happened and now we want compensation, this, that, and the other. What will be looked at? First of all, it will be seen whether those goods were sent by bills of the receipt or the document bills of lading is attached. For those attached in the sense is there in place for the goods. And the second thing that will be seen is, does the bill of lading have this clause saying that bills of lading is subject to the provisions of the Hague Rules? Only those will be eligible. Those shippers who have this, this bill of lading will be eligible to fight or to defend themselves in such a matter. Now, the carrier can exempt, as per the common law, the carrier did not have the right to exempt himself from the liability in case of particular ordinary commercial shipments. But the Coxa Act has given him that kind of a privilege that he would be able to exempt, the carrier would be able to exempt himself from the liability in case of particular goods, ordinary commercial shipment, but that will have to be mentioned either in the bill of lading or the contract that the carrier and the shipper would have. Bills of lading prima facie evidence of receipt of the goods, but not prima facie evidence of the weight of the goods. Because sometimes, and on this, I myself would seek sort of clarification from people who are working in the industry, who are probably who are the shippers agents, um, what exactly is the format of the bills of lading. On the bills of lading, what is the weight mentioned, or is it only the number of packages that are mentioned? Because when we say that bills of lading prima facie evidence of receipt of the goods, it means that if there is a bill of lading, then it is understood or for uh, taken for granted, not again in a negative way, but it is understood that yes, the goods have been handed over to the carrier for sailing them. Okay, but bills of lading would not become a good evidence for proving what is the weight of the goods. Because again, there is sometimes a bills of lading, or again, you can correct me if I am wrong, because like I said, you all are into day-to-day business of this, and you can correct me if I am wrong. There is very often that the shipper would make the bills of lading and send it to the carrier or the carrier's agent, and there's a possibility that sometimes only the number of packets is mentioned, and then there is also a question of a gross weight and net weight and a lot of other things that are there. So therefore, bill of lading may not be a complete evidence. Of course, there is a mention of the weight, so that can be taken into consideration, but there could be a dispute on that, and therefore it is not a prima facie evidence of weight, but it is certainly, again, there is somebody who's not on mute. Please go on mute. Okay, and last but not the least, none of the provisions can affect certain stipulations in the Merchant Shipping Act of 1958. Sorry, there's an error over there. 1 minute, let me see if this the Merchant Shipping Act. You all will be doing the Merchant Shipping Act next year. Yes, it is 1958. Okay, so you all will be doing the Merchant Shipping Act next year, and you all will also be doing the Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act in detail in the next year. This year, it is just we are just giving you a glimpse, because we are starting the shipping laws with you this year. And that is why this is just a glimpse that you're getting of this particular act. Now, we spoke about the Hague Rules, okay? And the Hague Rules were formed in 1924. Then again, they were amended by Hague-Wisby rules in 1968, which means there was another convention that happened in Hague again. And in this convention, they also discussed, probably because 1924 to 68, how many years? There were about 44 years that have gone in between. So they again must have discussed as to, what are certain things that probably need to change, and probably need to refine, made better. And similarly, there was another convention that took place in Brussels. The 1924 and 68 conventions happened in Hague, that is in Netherlands, and the next convention that happened in 1979 was in Brussels, known as the Brussels Protocol, which was held in Belgium. And based on all, all the amendments that are made, we're going to have the list that you see over here. I'm going to speak about that a little more in detail. So like I said, when we spoke about in the last slide, we were speaking about, if you see the fifth point, carrier can exempt himself from the liability in case of particular goods, ordinary commercial shipment and all. So who is a carrier? So the carrier for this particular act includes the owner or the charterer who enters into a contract of carriage with a shipper. Okay, so not necessarily that only the owner will be responsible. Even the charterer will be responsible because the owner of the ship has built the ship for a particular purpose and he has now chartered it to somebody else. Now the somebody else is a responsibility also of the somebody else to see that due diligence is done before accepting the kind of cargo that they are accepting. So when we are speaking over here, it is a responsibility of not only the owner, but also the charterer to see to it that a right and appropriate due diligence is done in order to sign a contract with the shipper. Okay? Because if your vessel does not have the amenities, it does not have the facility for carrying particular kind of cargo, you might as well not enter into a contract with the shipper. Correct? So based on that principle, this is taken. Okay? Now, contract of carriage applies only to contracts of carriage covered by the bills of lading. That is something that we said. And again, bills of lading, which has a mention that this bills of lading here we have seen. Let's see again. Binds me. The clause stating that the bills of lading is subject to the provisions of the Hague Rules. Only that what is mentioned. Let me look at the chat. Have I got any sort of, no, nothing. Nobody has responded on, what is probably what are some of the things that are, a sort of a specimen bills of lading, or what are some of the things that are mentioned on the bills of lading. I'm still waiting from everybody who's been working in the shipping industry and who's been dealing with bills of lading in and out every day, for them to give us some insight on bills of lading as to what are some of the things that are mentioned on the bills of lading. And also to the others, I will give you an example for people who are not actually working on this bills of, who have not really witnessed the bills of lading, or who are not working in that sort of an area, to go on the net, not immediately now, but anytime after the class, and understand, what a bills of lading is, what is it that it contains, and that will make it easier. That will make it. Please type on in the chats, please. We will take it from there. I have I have sort of requested you all to do this initially. So please do that, because it becomes very disturbing in between. So so that is what we were speaking about. Contract of carriage applies only to contract of carriage covered by a bill of lading or any similar document of title, but the mention of this clause that the bill of lading is sort of based on is subject to the provisions of the Hague Rules is important. Only those will be considered for this particular act. Rest will not be considered. Now we're speaking about the carriage of goods by sea act. So it is extremely important for us to understand what is goods as per this act. Like we defined goods as per the Sale of Goods Act. Any property, any movable property, which contains anything that is fastened from the earth, and it also contains excluding actionable claims and all of that. That is That is what is goods is defined in the Sale of Goods Act. Let us see what goods mean or what goods include in for the Indian POXA. So goods include goods, wares, merchandises, and articles of every kind whatsoever, except live animals and cargo, which by the contract of carriage is stated as being carried on deck and is so carried. Okay, so cargo that is carried on deck and live animals are not subject to this act. So if anything that happens to the goods that are carried on deck or anything that happens to live animals, the shippers of this kind of a cargo or the shippers of this animals would not be able to claim or get any sort of remedy from this particular act. Yes, so we are getting some mentions. So what is it mentions? It mentions name of the cargo, quantity loaded, country of origin, discharge port, etc. So my question to the person who is mentioned this is, when we say quantity loaded, does it specify the weight or at all times, or sometimes it may also specify the number of, what do you call them, number of number of boxes, you may say, or number of items that have been saved. That is,
it depends upon cargo to cargo.
Can you please type it there in the thing rather than okay. So yeah, so it depends upon cargo to cargo is what. So both the things are compulsorily mentioned, or is it either of the two is okay? Number of units loaded. So sometimes it is number of units loaded, and that's particularly the reason why it says that weight would not, bill of lading would not be the prima facie evidence of weight. I also have a question from someone asking, what is bill of lading prima facie evidence of receipt? That is it implies that yes, the carrier has received the goods from the shipper. Okay, it implies. Now, if you go to a shop, for instance, your mobile phone is not working, and you want to go and get it repaired. If you'll go to the shop and give it for repairs, what do you get? You get you will take a receipt, right? Why do you take this receipt? One is to understand what would be the expense, but the second is also to make it clear that my phone is lying with you. Right? So that is the receipt. That is the prima facie. That receipt is a prima facie evidence of receiving the goods by someone. So that's what it mentions. Let us move ahead. Okay. The fourth point is the carrier shall be bound before and at the beginning of the voyage to exercise due diligence. That is to make the ship seaworthy. Second is properly man, equip and supply the ship. Thirdly, make the holds, refrigerating and cool chambers and all other parts of the ships in which goods are carried fit and safe for their reception, carriage and preservation. This is exactly what I was talking about. Okay. So yes, making it seaworthy is making the ship, doing due diligence is making the ship seaworthy, definitely. And how would you make the ship seaworthy? By properly manning it, equipping it with the right kind of furniture, fixture, the machinery that is required for the ship to actually sail, and providing proper supplies to the ship, whatever is required. Oil is required, food is required for people who are manning, all those provisions and everything, and make the holds, that is the cargo where you're going to keep. You all know it better. I don't really need to explain, but there would be certain people sitting in our class in the audience who perhaps do not have knowledge about this business so much. They're freshers and may not understanding. But of course, I am sure in the span of 6 months, your knowledge must have increased many-fold. I remember our first lecture was on 6th of June. I was just going back and seeing, when we started, and perhaps on the 6th of June, when we started the lecture, you all must not have been, so much equipped with knowledge about the shipping. But now, after doing so many subjects, and every Sunday, I'm sure you're attending lectures. After doing all those, I'm sure your knowledge about the shipping industry has increased many-fold. But irrespective of that, I sometimes feel that we should help these candidates also by making these small kind of explanations, which will help them to understand the subject better. Okay? So the goods, basically what happens is, when we are saying carriage of goods, what are the things that are there in this carriage of goods? So carriage of goods is receiving the goods, carrying the goods from one port to another port, and also preserving the goods when they are carried. Okay, also somewhere in this act, maybe you will be able to read in the notes and all, somewhere in the act, it is also mentioned that, I think I made a mention of that also. No, I only made the mention that if goods are carried within the port itself, from one, sometimes maybe from one port to another, whatever it is, that doesn't get into, come under the compliance of this act. It has to be from one port to another port. Also, when does this act actually come into picture? It is only when the goods are loaded in the vessel. From the time the goods are loaded in the vessel, from that time to the time they are unloaded or discharged from the vessels and handed over again to the port authorities of the destination port. Only in that period, if something goes wrong, then that becomes a subject of compliance of this act. The fifth and the very important point is remedy, or what is the liability of the carrier. This act, as we all know, it clearly shows the liability that the carrier of the goods, okay, will be liable in case if something happens, if the goods are lost, if the goods are damaged, if the goods are deteriorated. So there's a liability that they will have, and the shipper will have some right on that. Okay, so let us understand the liability of the carrier and the right of the shipper in case of any kind of loss or damage. So under the Hague Visby rules, the limits of the liability of the carrier for loss of or damage to the goods is to the extent of 666.67 SDR per package or other shipping units, and or 2 SDR per kilograms of the gross weight of the goods lost or damaged, whichever is higher. Kuch samjha? We have understood anything? I just want to make a reference to. So SDR is special drawing rights. What is the special drawing rights? It's a form of a currency. What kind of a currency? So like we have the euros, we have the dollars, we have the pound, we have yen, we have rupees here in India. Okay. So when we speak about special drawing rights, it is a mix of 5 currencies. An average of these 5 currencies is taken into consideration, and an and one special drawing right rate is determined. Okay. So what are these 5 currencies? I also often tend to forget, but yes, dollars, euros, what I said is right. The Japanese yen, pounds, and the Chinese, what is the Chinese currency called? I can't really get it. If somebody can get it, please. Yes, somebody was saying.
It's renminbi.
Yeah, renminbi. Thank you so much for that. So these 5 are actually considered while making an SDR, okay? And the SDR rate is always calculated on the basis of US dollars. And if you ask me, I have done this thoda bahut homework, which I always do whenever I take this particular subject for the convenience for people to understand. The SDR rate yesterday was 104.9 rupees. So when I did the same subject last year, on that day, the rate was 106 INR. Okay, 1 SDR is equal to, so it is, so yeah, yes, in dollars. And this what we are speaking is then converting it into your Indian rupees. So 1 SDR is 104.9 rupees today. So if there is any loss has happened or any damage is done to the goods, then it would be an amount equivalent to 666.67 SDR, which means 104 rupees into 666.67 per package, or any other shipping unit that has been agreed upon by the carrier and the shipper. Or it would be 2 SDRs per kilogram of weight, that is 104 point whatever 6 or whatever we said, multiplied by 2 per kilogram of weight of the goods lost or damaged, whichever is higher. So whichever is higher will be given to by the carrier to the shipper. So weight will be either determined per package or it will be determined per kilogram that is mentioned in your bills of lading. Okay, so that is the liability of the person. It will not depend upon what was the worth of the cargo that was sent. Okay, it will only decide, it will only give, the liability will only be limited to this amount that has been mentioned over here. So which means if two into 104 only I'm taking for our calculation, okay, that is 208 is the rate into 100 kgs of cargo. If it was lost, then it would be, it comes to 20,800. And let us look at per package rate. What happens is it is 666.67 multiplied by 104. So it comes to 69,773 per package. Okay, or it will be 20,000 per kilogram, because in per package there would perhaps not 20,000, what I said, 208 per kilogram. And then depending upon, okay, so it was only one package. Okay, for consideration, it was one package. So it for that one package, the amount comes to about 70,000, and there was the weight, you're going to take the weight. The weight was 100 kgs, so it comes to about 20,000. So what is higher is 69,000. So perhaps 69,000 is something that will be paid by the carrier to the shipper. That's what it means. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for thank you so much, everybody, for whatever you have mentioned over here. That gives me an affirmation that all of y'all are, or at least some of y'all who have mentioned something on the chats are listening to the lecture. So thank you for that. Because sometimes, when you are, and I've been saying this to you all very often, that sometimes you need that kind, otherwise you think that you're only speaking to the walls. Sorry, I have been cutting people who are trying to, speak on the microphone. But what happens is then, it leads to another, and the discussion and on. And like I have already mentioned, we do not have that much time at the moment. So that is the reason why I'm trying to restrict people from talking. Let us see if at the end of the class, we may, take a couple of minutes more and discuss. Okay, so yeah, there are only 5 currencies. I know somebody's mentioned 6 currencies, but under SDR there are these 5 currencies, and I hope what I have mentioned over as currencies are right. When I have someone called Santosh telling me that under SDR 5 currencies. Santosh, you can only just type in the chat if these 5 currencies that I mentioned are right. That is pounds, euro, dollar, the Chinese currency. Sorry, I'm not able
yuan. You can also call it yuan, Chinese yuan.
Yeah, please, but I will just call it Chinese currency. For some reason, I'm not able to get it, and the Japanese yen. So these are the 5 currencies that make these special drawing rights. Okay, and so this, like I have said also in the beginning of the class, that we are that this will be discussed. This particular act, Indian COXA, will be discussed in detail in the next year. You again have that act, and by the next year, you will be more equipped with knowledge, and there would perhaps be more things that you would be able to you would want to seek explanation for and all. So for now, this what we have spoken is enough. With this, we come to the end of our first shipping act, that is the Indian Carriage of Goods by Sea Act 1925. Now, one mention I want to make over here. Since a very long time, we are saying Indian Carriage of Goods Act. Indian Carriage of Goods, Indian Carriage of Goods, that is something that we are repeating time and again. But in shipping business, is goods the only thing that is carried from one port to another? No. It's also passengers that are carried from one port to another. So if there is Indian Carriage of Goods Act by Sea, which is specific to goods, is there anything that also covers passengers or human who are carried from one port or transported from one port to another port? So for that, there is something known as the Athens Convention. I've spoken about convention initially itself. So there's something known as Athens Convention, which you will be doing next year again. And that actually speaks about, what is the responsibility of the carrier and the rights and all of that. When a human or passengers are carried from one destination to another. And this Athens Convention happened in 1974. Okay, and the Athens Convention 1974 is an international convention on the carriage of passengers and their luggage by sea. I don't want to speak about this act just now because you're going to speak about it next year. So it's not relevant for us this year, but just for you to understand and not, keep wondering as to why, where, then what happens to human. That's the reason why I thought I should make a mention. Okay, I also made a mention of the Merchant Shipping Act in one of our previous slides. So Merchant Shipping Act of 1958, I said. The intent and purpose, this again is next year. I'm just reading out from your next year's book. The intent and purpose of the act has been brought out in its preamble as follows. An act to foster the development and ensure the efficient maintenance of an Indian mercantile marine in a manner best suited to serve the national interest, and for that purpose to establish a national shipping board and a shipping development fund to provide for registration of Indian ships, and generally to amend and consolidate the law relating to merchant shipping. So in this Merchant Shipping Act, it's all about, registration of shipping. If there is any accident, then, to inform the appropriate authorities and all of that. Again, let me not go into much details of those acts because, as I said, you're going to study that in the next year, not relevant to this year. We have enough to cover this year. So let us first concentrate and focus on that. Okay, with this, yes, Yuan. Okay, thank you so much for that. Yuan, I liked it. I don't know, somehow I was not able to, pronounce that, although I had written it and kept, but I couldn't pronounce that. So these are the 5 things that are, because you will be speaking about SDR, I'm sure, quite often, because that's actually that's the rate at which anything called penalties or anything is imposed. So yes, can we close the Indian Carriage of Goods Act by Sea and move on to the next important act, that is the Indian Ports Act 1908. Anybody working on the port? Anybody working on the port? Any port officials do we have over here? No? Or maybe we have, but they may respond in a while. So if there are any people who are working on the port officials, please put in the chat that yes, you're there to support us in the discussion of the Indian Ports Act 1908. You all may be sometimes wondering, that why does this lady need support of people who are working in the industry? Let me tell you honestly, that is how your management studies are done. By sharing knowledge, sharing information about each other's business, or perhaps the practices that are used in different industries. Okay, there are certain things that are prescribed by law. There are certain things which needs to be adhered to, but there are also certain things beyond the things that are prescribed in the law that are used as best practices. And so that therefore I always recommend, welcome people from within the industry to come and join us in this sort of discussion and make, or rather enrich, the discussions that we are having. And that's the only thing. Otherwise, all of us are wise enough. Today, some of you all, I'm sure there would be some in this class who have already read what is the Indian Ports Act, even if you are not working on the ports, even if you're fresh to the shipping industry, maybe you have already read that and want to keep you equipped. There is so much of information that you get online, on the net, and all of that. But when you are, I just want to mention one thing over here, extremely personal, and you may wonder why I want to mention something that is very personal over here, but I want to do that for your understanding. Is I have done my law LLB from Government Law College in 1986. I started 3 years ago, so 89 I ended. While I was studying law, I was never able to understand. I was never able to understand how am I going to apply this in practice. we were speaking about bailment. Remember, we spoke about bailment, we spoke about guarantee, we spoke about indemnity, and all of that, all those commercial laws that we were speaking about. And I was encouraging you guys to, you people, sorry if guys sounds like a slang, I'm absolutely sorry about that. But I was encouraging you guys to, often, sorry again, you people to again participate in the conversation and give examples, live examples from what or how it happens in the shipping industry. That is because it doesn't make sense that you are understanding the concept to understand. You're understanding perhaps the meaning of what is said, but you don't know how to apply it to the practical or how to use it as a practical solution in your day-to-day business. And here I have mentioned this right on the first day also. We are not making lawyers over here. We are making shipping management professionals who need to understand what are some of the legalities that needs to be adhered to, and in order that they adhere to these legalities, it is extremely important for them to understand how to put this in practice. And that is the only reason why I encourage people to. But like I said, we do not have so much of time that we sit and we sit and discuss a lot of things, and we have to sort of hurry up in our this thing. So that's the reason why now I am not encouraging people to talk more on that. But yes, if you put things in the chat also while I'm talking, it's easy, simple for you to type also. It will make more sense and enrich our discussions. On that note, we will start with the Indian Ports Act 1908. So we all know what a port is. If we don't know what a seaport is, we at least know what an airport is. So something similar, but of course, yes, it's the operations would vary from that of an airport and seaport, and therefore, the sort of the look and feel of the airport and the seaport may perhaps be a little different. But a port, as we all know, is an area where all ships or all vessels come, and that's the place where the embarkment, disembarkment, loading, unloading of cargo, passengers, and all that. Okay, so that is a port. On the road, we are every day witnessing the kind of traffic that happens on the road. Okay, specifically at signals or at some roads which are which have a lot of sort of movement of vehicles and all. So traffic happens. We have also heard about air traffic, haven't we? There is a possibility that some of you all, while traveling by air, the pilot has announced that the first thing the pilot would announce is that now we are on our descending mode, and then after a while the pilot announces that within so many minutes we will be landing at such and such airport, and then suddenly the pilot will announce that because of traffic situation, it will take us a little more longer to land at a particular airport. And then again, you will if you're looking down from the window, you'll say, oh, I had seen this sometimes back, because the pilot is hovering around the airport, but he's not getting a chance to land, and that is what is known as air traffic. Similarly, we also have seaport traffic. Okay, and so seaport traffic is there. Then there are vessels which are coming to the port. It has to be so they have to be there has to be that loading, unloading of things that happen, and also for this purpose. Also for this purpose, there has to be proper manpower who's there, who's employed on the port. So looking at those facilities of providing proper manpower for that thing. And then there are other facilities also which needs to be provided, proper berth and proper, lot of other technical terms are there, that needs to be done. When a vessel comes in. If we have parked our car at the wrong place, what happens? There is a van known as a towing van which comes and which takes the car to wherever they want to take because it's not working. Now, in case of, I'll just give you just one thing, when we're speaking about various other facilities that are required, just one facility I'll speak about, and that is when a ship is nearing the port, the ship gets a proper, is it known as berth to park itself? I just want an answer in yes or no, to park itself. When it needs, where the ship needs to be parked in a berth, there is a possibility that it cannot do it by itself. If we have seen, if we have gone on hill stations and if we go on a boat ride, we will often see that, when the time comes for us to get out of the ship, there is somebody pushing, because these are small vessels that we are, going on a boat ride, small boats that we are going. So there would be somebody pushing it by leg, so that it goes in the proper direction and gets parked. Or there would be some other, there would be a rope that, somebody would be pulling and put and seeing to it that it is parked at a proper place, correct? So similarly, for huge vessels, also something like that needs to be done so that they are parked in their berth, in the right position. I've got some answers for this. Let me see. Yes, thank you. So it has to be, and so there has to be another vessel which perhaps can do this job for this huge vessel that is going to come and park itself on that berth. And this facility is known as your piloting facility. There is also a tugging facility, towing facility, where, like I said, sometimes the ship for some reason is not able to move, and then there is another vessel that comes and that places it somewhere. And a lot of such facilities are there, which we will be discussing about. Sagar Kumar, go on mute, please. Which we will be talking about in the course of this act. So basically, there are all these facilities, all these things that needs to be managed on the board. Now, how they are managed? I always say this in law, or in our general life, also, when things are working smoothly, there is absolutely no need of any law, any act, anything. But the moment something goes wrong, then if there is no law or no act prescribed for providing remedies or defining rights and liabilities, and even defining certain concepts, then life becomes a hell, or life becomes impossible. I'm sure you all will all agree with this. Okay? And that's the reason why these acts become important, and they play a critical role when things tend to go wrong. Correct? Therefore, in the port, humongous activities are happening in the ports. Again, we will be seeing in due course that ports are classified into two types. There are minor ports and there are major ports, and then there are minor ports. And who is looking after the operations of the minor port, who is looking after the operations of the major ports, everything. We will be talking about that. But there are humongous activities that happen. And for those activities, if there is no legality, if it is not prescribed by any act or any law, what is right and what is wrong, then it can become a havoc if things go wrong. And that's the reason why why the Indian Ports Act was enacted in 1908. Now, if you all have seen your syllabus, and I'm sure most of you all have, there is also something known as the minor ports. What to say, I keep. Okay, so there is, sorry. There's also something known as the Major Ports Act, which was formulated in 1963. So, does it mean that if there is a Major Port Trust Act 1963 in place, the Indian Ports Act 1908 only refers to the minor ports or ports that are not major? No. Or is it that if there is an Indian Ports Act 1908 and now there's a Major Ports Act of 19, whatever we saw, 58 of what I forgot the year, so many acts, and 63, does it mean that this act, the Indian Ports Act, becomes invalid? No. The provisions of the Indian Ports Act 1908 are applicable to major ports also. But the activities in the major ports are much, much more humongous. They're huge, much huger than the other ports which are referred to as minor ports or ordinary ports. There are some additional provisions that are made for managing the Major Ports Act in the Major Port Trust Act 1963. Wait, I want to also, if you look at the major ports, if you look at the screen, this act is known as the Major Port Trusts Act 1963, whereas this is only referred to as the Indian Ports Act 1908. That is because the major ports have a body which acts as a trust, and that body, how that body is constituted, how many number of people are there on that body, and all that has been explained in the Major Port Trust Act, whereas the Indian Ports Act 1908 will lay down all the things as to what are the powers of the port officials, what are the objectives of any port in general, whether major or minor, and what are the port charges, and so on and so forth. We will see when we are doing the act now. Okay. So when we speak about the Indian Ports Act 1908, first and the foremost, let us look at the objective of this act. Why was this act formulated? So the first objective is that it introduced rules and regulations relating to the safety of ships. Now, safety of ships when? Safety of ships when the ship is in the port or close to the port area. The ports are not responsible for the safety of the vessels when they are in high sea. They're only responsible when they are on the ports. Okay. We have been speaking about activities at the port, and so many activities that happen at the port, and then there are facilities that the ports provide, and then there are people who are manning and doing various duties at the port and all. Yes, the government will pay for all of this if it is a government port. But ports in India are run in three different manners. They are either government ports, or so there are certain ports which are taken care of by the central government. The major ports are taken care of by the central government. The smaller ports or the minor ports are taken care of by the state government. And there are certain ports which are also run by private parties. Okay, so in order that all these facilities are provided in the best of manner, in order that the manpower is paid on time, there is a lot of money that is required. Where does this money come from? When government builds road, what it does, it takes toll, correct? From us, people who are using that roads. Likewise, people who are using the facility of the ports, there are certain charges that these people, that is the vessel managers, the vessel owners, or charterers, whoever it is, who is making use of the port facilities, have to pay certain charges to the port. And how these charges are collected or how these dues are collected is also something that is been elaborated in the Indian Ports Act 1908. The third important objective is to avoid congestions of ports. I was speaking about traffic. So sometimes it could be, the port could get very congested. It could be difficult for the ship to, get a proper berth. For people who have not sailed, just 1 minute, please. For people who have not sailed, for people who have not perhaps sailed by a ship, for them, if you have flied, if you have traveled by air, sometimes it also happens that you have landed and you are sitting in the aircraft for some times. Why is it? Because it has not got that bay. They call it a bay. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. No? Because the aircraft has not got a bay where it will park itself and where they will load, unload passengers, embark, disembark passengers, load, unload the cargo or the luggage or whatever has gone by that flight. Okay, similarly, it can happen in the seaports also, that all the berths are full. There are vessels that are there, and therefore the incoming vessels are not getting a proper berth, and this could become a matter of congestion at the port. So somebody has to manage this. If a vessel has come, it has to move out in the prescribed time. If it is not moving out in the prescribed time for some reason, then it has to be taken to an area where it suppose, for instance, there is some technical fault, then it has to be towed and taken to an area where it can be repaired, and the berth has to be vacated for other vessels that are waiting. Okay, so to avoid congestions at the port also, and to facilitate proper navigation of ship. These are the objectives of the Indian Ports Act 1908. Okay, let us look at what are the salient features of the act. It applies to all ports mentioned in the first schedule of the Act. Okay, and we spoke about schedule also in the. Just give me 1 minute, okay? Yeah, so it applies to all. When we were speaking about the Indian TOPSA, also we said that there's a schedule to the Act, and that schedule is, the rules that are the rules of Hague. The Hague rules are, taken and put as a schedule to the Act. Now here, the Indian Ports Act also has a schedule. It has different schedules. The first schedule we're going to speak about, because we want to know where the applicability of this particular act. So who does this act apply to? So it applies to all ports mentioned in the first schedule of the act. Yes. So when we speak about the first schedule, again, another homework for all of you all. You can go back to the internet. You can, sort of take out this act, the Indian Ports Act 1908, and look at the schedule to the act. And I am sure you don't even have to do all that. Even if you just type the first schedule to the Indian Ports Act, you will get that. And have a look have a look at it. Some of you all would have looked at it because you all will need to, identify what are the charges that you will have to pay or whatever. So there would be some people, if there are any people who have, who make use of this schedule to this act, who have referred to the schedule, who have seen the schedule, you can please put in the chat that yes, schedule seen. So, I can also know what is the kind of level, what is the kind of level of knowledge people have of this particular industry. Okay. So it applies to all ports mentioned in the first schedule. And when we speak about all ports mentioned in the first schedule, even the major ports are included. And since the major ports are also included in the first schedule, it is obvious that the Indian Ports Act 1908 also applies to the major ports. Okay, so the first schedule will speak about the ports, the names of the ports. It will speak about the kind of vessels that are there. It will speak about what are the charges that the vessels are supposed to pay. The charges will definitely be based on the size of the vessel and those things. So these are some of the things that are there in the first schedule. Okay. The second feature of the Indian Ports Act 1908, it does not apply to vessels in the service of central state government and naval vessels of our country or foreign country arriving here on goodwill visit. It does not apply to that. Service of central and state government, any navy vessels or foreign country vessels which are arriving on a goodwill visit are excluded from the purview of this particular act. Now, to manage rules and regulations, all these things, we have seen the objectives, avoid congestion, facilitate navigation, collect dues. For all these things, look at the relating that the ships are safe and all. For all of that, there is a hierarchy of personnel that is hired at the port. Okay, so there is a conservator of the port, there is a deputy conservator of the port, there is a port officer, there is harbor master, there are port health officers, then there are pilots and tugboat operators, etc. Now, there would be certain ports which may have a conservator and a deputy conservator and a port officer and a harbor master and a port health officer, everything. But there would be some ports which may just have a port officer. And yes, port health officer is something that is required. Or a harbor master, and not have the others. Now, what will this depend upon? This will depend upon the size of the operations on those particular ports. Are so many people really required? And these are not the only people. You will not see a port where there's only a conservator and nobody else to work with him, or there's only a harbor master and nobody else to work with him. Harbor master would be a person who's leading the team, but across or under the harbor master, there would be various set of people who are working. There would be somebody working in operations. There would be some of the ports would have their own tugboats, their own piloting facilities. Some of them may outsource these facilities. So, if they have their own, then managing all those people, all that is there. But this, what we are speaking about, is somewhere at the top of the pyramid of the port hierarchy, is what we are speaking about. So there would be some ports. If there are major ports, that perhaps would be a conservator and a deputy conservator. Okay. If it is a minor port, it could perhaps have only the harbor master who's taking care of all the activities along with his team. Okay. So it depends upon what is the size of operations. And based on that, their responsibilities will be decided. Okay. For a major port, if there is a deputy conservator, if there is a port master, if there is a harbor master, then perhaps the role of the conservator is only to oversee whether things that are getting done are in the best of the interest of everybody or not. Okay. If the port only has a harbor master, then he is more of a doer along with his team. He's not, he is a supervisor for some of the things that his team is doing, but he may also be a doer for some of the things that he needs to do because he do not have somebody over him like a conservator and a deputy conservator. So sometimes, or very often, these words or these designations are used interchangeably. And that was the reason why I was finding or looking for people, if there are any people who are working at the ports, for us to get, on the ground information about how exactly this hierarchy works. But to my knowledge, and which I believe it to be true, some of these designations are used interchangeably. So like a port master, at some places he may be port officer, sorry. At some places he would be referred to as port officer. At some places he may also be referred to as a harbor master. A conservator and a deputy conservator may have interchangeable roles. They would not perhaps be a conservator. I would like to make another very important point over here. Nowadays what is happening is everybody is getting into that corporate mode, commercial mode, and it is very, very difficult from the HR perspective to motivate people. Some people get motivated by job description. Some people get motivated by designation. Some people are not bothered. You call me a clerk, you pay me what I want. I am happy to be called as a clerk and work as a clerk too. In that kind of a situation, I'm sure all of you all, whether shipping or not shipping, are working for corporates. And all of you all understand the importance of motivating the employees in the organization. Yeah, I am moving from law to a little bit of principles of management, but that's also important for all of us to know and to understand this port hierarchy also. Now, if you look at the organizations, certain organizations will have flat structure, but there are certain organizations which will have tall structure. So when we speak about a tall structure, they will have lot of designations in their organization. Junior executive, senior executive, assistant manager, manager, senior manager, senior manager, general manager, senior general manager, VP, senior VP, CEO, COO, CEO, all of that. Very often we also see in organizations, when a person's designation changes from junior executive to executive, nothing changes, the work remains the same, but only his designation changes and sometimes maybe the salary changes. The person, there are instances, and I would very authentically say that this happens in at least 60% of cases, that people have moved from senior executive to a managerial position, but they do not have anybody working under them. They have been given this designation to motivate them, to show to the outside world that, yes, I am the manager. If you are the manager, you should have somebody who is reporting to you, whose work you are managing. It is not just your work anymore. But that does not happen. But like I said, why is this designation given? This designation is purely given to motivate. That can also be a reason for this kind of a hierarchy. So you call somebody a harbor master, and then you want to motivate him and give him a better designation. So it could be the port officer, or it could be the deputy conservator, or you hire somebody on the position of a deputy conservator, saying that maybe after 2 or 3 years we'll make him a conservator. He will also feel motivated. He or she will feel motivated at that point of time, and that's the reason why these are there. But in most of these cases, you will see and you will agree, when we are going to do the roles of these people, in most of the cases, you will find that the roles don't really change. They're doing the same thing. It's only that their designations are different. On this note, we will take a break of 10 minutes and come back, and then we will start discussing the powers of each of these court officials. Let's come back in 10 minutes and start our conversation again. In the Indian Courts Act 1908. Yeah, we've spoken about the hierarchy. We have seen. Now let us see at what are some of the responsibilities, some of the powers that the court officials will have. So, like we said, I mentioned this before. Also, the major ports fall under the purview of the central government, and the non-major ports are under the state government. Instead of calling them minor or small, let us call them as non-major ports. They are under the state government. Okay. So the central government and the state government will appoint conservators for each of the major and non-major ports respectively. Okay, the government will decide what kind of, the state government will decide who will be the conservator for the major ports, and the central government will decide for the major ports who will be the conservator, and for the non-major ports, the state government will decide. For the major ports, the Board of Trustees act as a conservator. Since I said, when we spoke about, when I was showing you the, title of the act, the Major Port Trust Act. So, there is something known as the Board of Trustees that is constituted by that act. So they act as a conservator and will appoint a deputy conservator for each port to look after the conservation of the port. For a non-major port, the state government will appoint a port officer for each port or a group of ports to undertake the conservation work of the port. The government may appoint a harbour master to assist the deputy conservator or the port officer depending on the scope of the work. So like I said, not necessarily that there will be this and there will be that. Okay, there could be either of the two or three, Some smaller ports may have a harbour master who will be assigned the duties of the port officer. So in some smaller ports, there will be no conservator, there will be no port officer, there will only be a harbour master. But whereas in certain ports, there could be a deputy conservator, and he will have and there would be there could be a deputy conservator, or there could be a port officer, and then there will be a harbour master who's assisting either of this, whoever is there. Okay. So now let us see what are the powers of the deputy conservator or the port officer, whatever you call it, whatever designation he is given, what is his role and what is his power. So his power or his role is to ensure that ropes and cables do not endanger the safety of vessels in the ports or near the entrance of the ports. That is something that he has to be mindful of. That is something that he has to train his team on, so that all these things are taken care of. Ensure that ropes and cables do not endanger the safety of vessels in the port or near the entrance of the port. Okay. The second is to remove any obstruction within the limits of the port area. If there's any obstructions, that is something that the port officer will first, or the deputy conservator, whoever it is, will remove that obstruction. To recover expenses of removal. Now, yes, removal is done and it has costed something. So where will this cost come from? So again, they may try to, levy some more charges, some surcharges or something like that, and recover those expenses. Like we know, toll free keeps increasing. In fact, for the road also, when we speak about toll, I'm sure a lot of y'all will be knowing and agree with this. When a toll is decided, it is decided for a particular period only. But what happens in our country? Once a toll, always a toll. If anybody from Mumbai is sitting over here, they will know Vashi toll, Mulund toll. We have been paying. We know what are the conditions of the roads, but we have been paying these tolls for donkey's years now. The construction cost and everything is over, but we're still paying it for because they claim that they are repairing the roads and all that. And that's how they can make it mandatory for us to pay also. So to recover expenses of removal is also the duty or power rather of the deputy conservator or court officer, whoever you call it, to raise or remove wreck affecting navigations within the port limits. Anything that affects navigation. Prevent damage to buoys and moorings. Okay, so all these are things that are required for parking the ships at the berth. They're required for for some reasons like the safety of the vessels. So anything that comes in the way of these things of the safety of the vessel, that needs to be removed, and whatever expenses it has cost can be recovered from the people who are using the facilities of the boat. They also have the right to board vessel and enter any premises for inspection within the limits of the port. Okay. And last but not the least, to request the master and crew of any vessel to prevent or extinguish fire. So these are some of the things that the deputy conservator or the port officer has the right to do. Okay, it's their power. They have been given this power by the Act, and anybody who is offended by these powers of them and says that revolts and says that we will not do this, or we will not pay the money, or we will not allow you to enter the vessel, we will not allow you to enter the premises for inspection, can be penalized for doing that. So that is the power of deputy conservator or port officer. Let us look at what are some of the functions that have been mentioned by the in the Act, the harbour master's functions. And of course, then there is a lot of work beyond this. Also, when we speak about the powers of the deputy conservator port officer, there are a lot of other things also which they need to do, but these are the powers. Likewise, when you say these are the functions, there would be certain things beyond these also that serve as a function of the harbour master. So what are they? Maritime safety and protection of marine environment, ensuring efficient flow of traffic through the ports and coastal waters, act as the head of the port police, traffic regulation, environment protection, and accident prevention. The next is head of pilotage service or coordinate with external pilotage service. So like I said, certain ports have their own pilotage service, whereas certain ports may have to take help of an external pilotage service. So if it is their own, the harbour master will head that service. And if it is from external, you have to coordinate. Carry out emergency measures in time of accidents. These are his functions. Now, if we look at some of these functions, like act as a head of the port police. What we have seen over here, to board vessels and enter any premises for inspection within the limits of the port. It's somewhere the same that they're speaking. Or all these things that we are speaking about, to ensure that ropes and cables do not endanger, to remove any obstructions, to prevent the damage of to buoys and moorings. All this will come over here. Maintaining maritime safety, protection of marine environment, or ensuring efficient flow of traffic through the ports and coastal areas. So these are the functions of the harbour master. Then somebody who plays a very important role is the port health officer. And what are his powers? He has the power to board the vessel and medically examine the officers and crew. then he has the right or power to examine documents, papers, logbook, etc., for the purpose of inquiring about health and physical condition of the persons on board. When we are going to do health and health regulation, this point will be elaborated. At that point of time, we will be able to understand better how it is done. To call any person for interrogation in the above connection, and to make any person so interrogated to sign a declaration of the truth of the statements made by him earlier. Okay, so basically this person is instrumental in seeing that everything on the ship was healthy, because if the ship is not healthy, if there is any ailment, a person who is ailing or anything, again, like I'm saying, when we do the health and health regulation, we see any rats that are found dead or any such thing, any rodents that are found dead on the ship and all, then that needs to be informed, because then there is a possibility that such people or such vessels may bring in an epidemic from some other country to their own country. And that's the reason why the port health officer plays a very important role in regulating health and health safety and health regulation in the port areas, or when the ship is near the close to the port areas. I was just seeing if there are any questions so far. Yeah, so we were speaking about first schedule, and I have seen someone said that they have seen the first schedule. For the others, I will repeat again, go on and have a look at it. It's always good to, have a look at the documents that we are speaking about in class. It makes your understanding more comprehensive and more clear. So the first schedule furnishes the following information: the name of the ports, vessels that are chargeable, rate of port duties and class of vessels, and frequency of dues payable in respect of ore vessels. Okay, so that is what is mentioned over there. Now, port charges. Let us have a look at what are the port charges that have been prescribed by the schedule. Okay, so all vessels, coastal or foreign, going shall be levied port dues at the rate prescribed in the schedule. Now that is very commonly understood that it is there. Okay, so government declares the rate of port dues and its frequency when a port is declared. It's the duty of the government to declare that how much port dues can a port take. Otherwise, what will happen is the port, if it is left to their own whims and fancies, they may exploit the ships that are coming to the port. Any increase in port dues will be effective on the expiration of 60 days from the order in the government gazette. So if the ports want to, or if the government decides to increase the port dues, then they'll have to give a notice in the government official gazette, and only after 60 days of giving this notice will they be able to declare or increase the port dues. Okay. Concession and rate is given to the ballast vessels without passengers and vessels not discharging or loading cargo. Concession is also given to coastal vessels. Okay, so there are different rates for different types of vessels, and there are certain concessions that can be given to these kind of vessels. Port authority to levy separate charges for services such as pilotage, haulage, mooring in the port. For the understanding of everybody, can somebody explain what is a mooring facility?
These are the small establishments on the port where the vessel is tied up once it reaches the berth or the anchorage.
Couldn't hear you. So,
These are small establishments, metal one or some concrete ones, which are established on the port outside lines. When the vessel reaches either the anchorage or the berth, the vessel is tied up with them with ropes.
yes, yes. The place where a boat or a ship is moored, they tied up at water, just okay, forget that. The ropes, chains, or anchors by or to which a boat, ship, or buoys is moved. Okay, so all these are all facilities. So when we're speaking about all these things, for the understanding of people who are not into this business, these are all things by which boats are fastened, so that the boats doesn't, it is such heavy boats may not really be in the position to float away. But these are some of the things that are given, that are provided, so that that provides a safety for the boat. It will not just go and bang into and bash into one another. So port authorities will levy separate charges for such services. Okay. Every vessel arriving at the port shall report its arrival to the deputy conservative or waiter of the port or whoever is responsible in that position within 24 hours of arrival. Not applicable boats and steamers carrying passengers and plying regularly. This is not applicable to boats and steamers that are carrying passengers and plying regularly between the ports. Okay, so it is only applicable to other boats and other vessels, not to the ones those who carry passengers and ply regularly. Deputy conservator to ascertain the weight of the vessel in case if the vessel is without the mark, and the master will have to pay for the expenses for determining the weight. Now, it is mandatory for the vessels to have their weight marked somewhere on the or vessel. Now, if that is not there done, and if the master of the vessel is not carrying proper documents to determine confirm the weight of the vessel, then the deputy conservator will be left with no option but to ascertain the weight. Now, ascertaining of weight is also going to cost the port or the deputy conservator. So in this case, the master will have to pay for the expenses for determining the weight. Proper receipt of port charges to be given to the master. Yes, if somebody is paid money, a receipt has to be given. Distraint the vessel if port charges are not paid, and initiate sales proceeding if charges not paid within 5 days. It does not happen, but the provision is made in the Act. And why is this such a stringent provision put in the Act? It is because, and plainly, to avoid congestion at the ports. Sale proceeds can be used to satisfy port dues, cost of sale, etc., and surplus to be given to the master. That is, if the port is indulging in selling the vessel because the vessel has not been removed from the port within the prescribed time, then whatever the port dues
Ma'am, you're not audible.
much, and I'm okay. So yeah. So we were on the last point. We were speaking about sale proceeds and all that. If the vessel is sold, then in that case, what can be kept back and what has to be given to the master of the vessel is something that we have spoken about. And no port clearance granted until port charges are paid. Okay, so that's another thing that needs to be taken into consideration while discussing or speaking about port charges. With that, we come to an end of the Indian Ports Act, and now we will speak about we will move on to the Major Ports Act. So we have spoken about ports, and we know that major ports acts are also included in the Indian Ports Act because they form a part of the first schedule of the Indian Ports Act and also. Now let us see what is it that is different in the Major Ports Act that was not there in the Indian Ports Act. Okay. So what is the aim of this act? The aim of this act is first and foremost to constitute a port authority for certain major ports in India and to vest the administration, control and management of such port with such authorities and for matters connected therein. Okay? That is the aim. So the first and foremost, so the aim is to constitute the port authorities, that is the trust for taking care of the port, and then to give them all the powers of control and management and all that. There is also, this was 1963. Then there is a Major Port Trust Amendment Act 1974. The objective of the amendment was to bring about a single act governing all major ports act, including Calcutta, Mumbai and Chennai. So previously, each of them had their own Port Trust Act. Okay. Mumbai had its own, Kolkata had its own, Chennai had its own and all that. But and then they had certain provisions which were distinct from one another and all that. So now after 1974, all the major acts have come into one act, and this Major Port Trust Amendment Act 1974 takes care of all the major ports. There are 13 major ports in India, of which 12 ports are run by the government, and one port, that is Mundra Port, is a privately run port. Any other information, if you all have on this, you can please put it on the chat. Let us look at what are the contents of this act. So this act first speaks about the constitution of this of the Port Authority. It speaks about the constitution, terms, qualification and disqualification of the trust, that is the Port Authority, who are the staff of the board, what is the work and services to be provided at the port, power to order seagoing vessels to use docks and wharves, responsibility of laws, that is something that is really important, accommodation of customs officer, tariff authority of major ports, stamp and sale and disposal of goods. These are some of the provisions that this act talks about. Let us look at the provisions one by one and very quickly. So constitution of the board, we are going to study a little civics here now. You must be remembering you studying civics in school. So here also we are going to speak about certain constitution of the Board of Trustees. So Major Port Trust Act, when we speak about trust, so there will be trustees who manage the trust. So the chairman is appointed by the central government. Like we said, the major the major ports come under the purview of the central government, and all other ports which are non-major ports. So apart from these 13 major ports in India, all other ports will be looked after by the state government. Okay. So because the major ports come under the purview of the central government, the chairman is appointed by central government. Then there's a deputy chairman. If the central government deems fit, the government will appoint. Otherwise, the chairman will only be a chairman. Then there has to be not more than 16 persons in case of each of the ports of Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai, and 17 persons in case of other ports. Okay. So because Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai are supposed to be the majorest, biggest with humongous operations, loads of operations. Their operation is even more than even huge than the other major ports. Therefore, here there will be not more than 19 people, which will include the chairman and the deputy chairman. And in the other ports, apart from these three, there will be not more than 17 people or as the board of trustees. Okay. So then who are the other members? There's a chairman that's appointed by central government. There's a deputy chairman that's also appointed by central government. Then who are the other 17 people in case of the three ports, and who are the other 15 people in case of the rest of the ports? So other members should be from the field of mercantile, marine department, labor trades, customs department, state government, defense services, railways, ship owners, shippers, etc. Because these are the people who are supposed to understand the shipping business, and therefore they are the ones who can give sort of good advice as to how to manage the ports. Okay, that's the reason why these are the people. Quickly moving on. What is the term of the board? The chairman and the deputy chairman should hold office during the pleasure of the central government, that is for as long as the central government is there, and as long as the central government wants to keep them, they can keep. What happens to the other people? Every other person will hold office for 2 years, commencing from the 1st April of the next year following his appointment. Okay. So if I am appointed as one of the board of trustees, today is what? Today is the 5th of December, 2021. So when will I retire from this position? I will retire from this position in on 31st March 2024. Because from the 1st April to next 2 years, I will be on the position. So 1st April 2022 to 31st March 2024, I will be in the position. A person appointed by virtue of an office to be a trustee shall, until the central government by notification in the official gazette otherwise direct, continue to be as a trustee so long as he continues to hold the office. Now, what do you mean by person appointed by virtue of an office? Okay, so let us see over here. We are speaking about mercantile marine department. So if a minister or a deputy minister for marine department is appointed as a trustee of one of these boards, then because he is holding that position, he is the trustee, and the central government by notification in the official gazette otherwise direct, he will continue to be the trustee as long as he continues to hold the office. Once he is not in the office, he will be debarred from being the member of the board, and there will be other person who has taken that office who will be the member of the board. Disqualification of office of trustees. A person shall be disqualified for being chosen as a trustee if he has been convicted and sentenced to imprisonment for an offence which, in the opinion of the central government, involves moral turpitude or is an undischarged solvent or holds an office of profit under the board. Okay, so if he's a convict, if he was ever imprisoned, he doesn't have a good moral, or he's an undischarged insolvent, that is, he is a bankrupt sort of, or if he holds office of profit under the board for any other things, he's making money from the board, has directly or indirectly any share of interest in any work done by the board, then he cannot be the trustee of the board, because purely there cannot be a conflict of interest. The board has to work completely keeping in mind the interest of the port. Anybody who's trying to, make his interest bigger than the board's interest, it will not be valid. Board to be a body corporate. Every board constituted under this act shall be a body corporate having perpetual succession and a common seal with power, subject to the provisions of this act, to acquire, hold, or dispose of property, and may by the name by which it is constituted, sued, or be sued. So when you speak about a body corporate, it is a company. So this board, even if it is a trust, it will have all the characteristics of a company. That is, it will have a perpetual succession directors will come, directors will go, trustees will come, trustees will go, but the board will be, this board will go on and on. Okay, it will have a common seal. That is, it will have the power to sign. It will have the power to acquire and dispose of property in its own name, in the name of the trust. Okay, so that is what it will be sued, and it can sue in its own name. Anybody who's done companies law before will understand these concepts very clearly. For others who have not done the company law, just one word or two, in one line, I will say that this board is a separate individual person who is formed by law. So he will have all those rights that an individual person, it will have its own identity and will have all the rights that an individual person would have. The board shall from time to time prepare and sanction a schedule of the employees of the board whom it deems necessary and proper to maintain for the purpose of this act, and such schedule shall indicate therein the designations and grades of the employees and their salaries, fees, and allowances. So that is obvious, because if people are going to work for it, then it is obvious that they're going to be paid also. So what are the people, who are the employees that are required? What would their designation be? That is something that has to be mentioned in the schedule for the government to also understand, because since this is managed by the government, not private, the salaries will be given by the government. Work and services to be provided at the ports. So there is this huge list, of work and services that the port needs to give to the ships or vessels that are coming into the port. Okay, so maybe you can have a look at this list that is there in the book also. So wharfs, quays, docks, stages, jetties, these are different types of things that are required for the vessels to enter inside for the vessels to enter the port, to park itself, to load, unload the cargo, to embark, disembark the passengers. So all those things need to be given to the people. Buses, railways, locomotives, rolling stock, shed, hotel, warehouses, any other accommodation for passengers, that also should be provided. Mooring, cranes, reclaiming, excavating, enclosing and raising any part of the foreshore, and all of that. Lighthouse, lightships. So this is an extensive list. Perhaps you will find even more in the notebooks that is given. But anything and everything that a vessel would require for carrying its goods, loading it for parking, loading its goods, unloading its goods, embarking its passengers, disembarking its passengers, if the passengers need any hotel facility, all of that needs to be provided. Power of the board to order seagoing vessels to use dock, wharves, etc. So there are certain powers, apart from the powers that we have seen of the conservator, deputy conservator, port officer, harbor master, and all that. There are some specific power that the boards have. That is when a dock, berth, wharf, quay, stage, a jetty, or pier erected at any port or port approaches under the provisions of this act has been completed, with sufficient warehouses, sheds, and appliances for receiving, landing, or shipping goods or passengers from and upon seagoing vessel, the board may, after obtaining the approval of the collector of customs and by notification published in 3 consecutive issues of official gazette, declare that such docks, wharfs, quays, stages, jetty, or pier is ready for receiving, landing, and all that. Okay, so they need to build this. Once this is built for the benefit of the seagoing vessels, then they have to notify in the official gazette. And once that is notified, or pier is ready for receiving, landing, and shipping, or for landing, shipping of goods and from. Okay. Now, once this declaration is made, that was the first part. Then comes the power. Once this declaration is made, the port can force the ships to use these facilities created by the port, provided it's convenient for the shipper and the vessels to load and unload the cargo. The board also has the power to remove vessels from docks and not allow them to come alongside. Okay, these are the powers that have been given to the board. Very important topic. Very, very important. And now we are going to look at, some of our special contract acts also. Liability of Board of Trustees for loss or destruction of goods. Now, typically what happens is the shipper will hand over. The shipper hands over the goods to the carrier's agent. The carrier's agent will load the cargo or the goods in the ship. After the ship has reached the destination, the cargo will be unloaded and handed over to the Board of Trustees. Why is it handed over to the Board of Trustees? It is handed over to the Board of Trustees so that the Board of Trustees will return it back to the consignee whose name is there in the bill of lading, or whom the shipper wants the goods to be handed over to. Okay. If you remember bailment, what is bailment? Bailment is nothing but giving the goods to someone for some specific purpose, and then when that specific purpose is over, the goods have to be returned back to the person who has given them, or to the person whom the person who has given the goods says should be given back. So this transaction of the carrier agent or the master of the ship handing over the ship to the Board of Trustees, and then the Board of Trustees handing over the ship to the valid concerned party, is also a contract of bailment. Okay. In this, who is the bailor? Is the ship owner or the agent. He is giving the goods to the Board of Trustees, who is the bailee. So all the rights of the bailor and the bailee will be applicable in this transaction. If you have any question on the Major Ports Act in your examination, or if you have any question on bailment in the examination, please try and correlate. Please try and make this point in your answer. Specifically, if you have a question on bailment, please make it a point to state this in your answer. So the Board of Trustees is the bailee. Okay, so they will have all the rights and liabilities that the bailee has, and the ship owner or the agent is the bailor who's handing over the goods to the Board of Trustees. Now it is the right of the Board of Trustees to hand over the goods to the consignee or any other person who the shipper wanted the ship owner to send the goods to. Okay, now let us understand the liability of Board of Trustees, loss or destruction. So what is loss? To understand loss or destruction, let us understand what is loss and what is destruction and so on. When you speak about loss means the goods are not traceable. You can't find. The goods were loaded on the vessel, but now they are missing. Is it possible that this happens? Is it possible that this can happen? That the goods were loaded in the vessel and now they have gone missing?
Yes.
It can happen, no, because they could have been unloaded on some other port only before this destination. Correct? Someone else would have claimed it, somewhere, any of these things can happen. So loss of goods not traceable. Where the goods were supposed to reach, whatever destination the goods were supposed to reach, when the goods have reached that destination, when the goods have not reached that destination, and there is absolutely no trace of where the goods are supposed to be known as or called as lost. Non-delivery is goods are traceable but not given to the consignee. Now, this could be several reasons. The consignee has not paid freight that the consignee was supposed to pay, or has paid what was it, partial freight, or the consignee doesn't have proper documents for which the board of trustees can hand over the consignment to the consignee. There could be several reasons for non-delivery. Destruction, total loss of cargo. Loss of cargo in the sense goods are there, but they're completely destroyed. Destruction. Okay, and deterioration is impairing or reducing the value of the article. Which means if perishable items like vegetables were sent in cargo, the quality of the vegetable has gone bad. That is deteriorating. Okay. Now, of course, some of the things over here are not in the control of the board of trustees. Some of the things over here are in the control of the ship, because perhaps the due diligence of the ship was not done. Perhaps the ship was not seaworthy or whatever. And that's the reason why sometimes certain things have happened. But what is the responsibility or liability of the board of trustees? Let us have a look at that. So, duty of taking care of the goods after they are landed and handed over to the board of trustees. That is where it starts. The duty of taking care starts there. And the responsibility is restricted. Okay, only the goods for which receipt is issued to such period as may be prescribed for the date of taking charge of the goods by the board. Okay, board is not going to take care of your goods up to infinity. There is a specific period or time frame for which the board will take care of the goods. Beyond that, they're not liable to take care of the goods. So, for example, under the Port of Mumbai, the period prescribed for loss or damage is 7 clear working days. Okay, so you have to go and you have to inform in 7 clear working days that our goods are not found, are not traceable, or our goods have come, but they have come in a damaged situation, so on and so forth. Notice of loss or damage of cargo has to be given within the number of days prescribed, failing which the port will not be absolved of the responsibility. So, like I said over here, if in the Port of Mumbai, if this notice is not given in 7 clear working days, the port is going to raise its hands and say, we are not responsible. You should have come within 7 working days. Okay. So that is there. That's the liability. We are also going to speak about this sale and disposal of goods. What happens if goods are not claimed on time and all of that. But before that, let us look at certain things like accommodation of custom officer. Now again, I'm telling people who must have not sailed. There would be, I'm sure there would be 70% of the people perhaps, or I will not say 70 maybe too high to say. There would be about 50% of people who must have sailed in this room, but there would be another 50% who have not sailed. And there would be, out of that, there could be 10% of people who have no idea of what shipping business is. So for them, I would again like to correlate this with an example of our air. We must have all traveled by air at some point in time or the other. So customs plays a very important role, and this is specifically so in case of your international travel. So, and it is only for the purpose of seeing that people who are getting goods are paying proper duty on the goods that they have got. Wherever they are eligible to pay a duty, they are paying the duty that they have got. Okay, so and who does this? Who evaluates what is the duty that people have to pay? Who evaluates whether duty needs to be paid or not? Who evaluates what kind of goods have come under or fall under the purview of duty? It is the customs officer. So like at the airport, you will see that there's a customs, there's a place to get down from the airport, you collect your luggage, and then you are screened for your luggage, and you are screened to see if there are any articles that you're carrying which needs to be notified, which needs duty for which needs to be paid. Okay, so there's a designated area that is given to customs officer for that. Now these customs officers are not the employees of the airport. Okay, similarly, in a seaport, also people who are traveling by sea, also there's a chances that they want to evade the duty that they need to pay. So care has to be taken that they are paying the appropriate duty, and for this, there has to be custom officers at the seaport also, and the board of trustees are required to provide accommodation to the customs authority to use some premises in the port area where they will evaluate, assess, identify whether any custom duty needs to be paid for people who have bought goods for the cargo that is come. The said place is to be maintained by the port. It is the port that maintains it. The port is entitled to levy charges for the collector of customs for providing such facility. Okay, because they're giving place and all that. Now, customs is a different department. Your port authorities is a different department, so they can always levy the charges from the collector of customs. Tariff Authority of Major Ports. Now, this chapter was added in 1996. The Tariff Authority for framing this chapter was basically added for framing the scale of rates issued vests with the scale of rates that are issued for different activity that rests or vests with the Tariff Authority of Major Ports and not with the Board of Trustees. So it is the Tariff Authority of Major Port who will decide what the rate should be, and the rates frame becomes effective once they are published in the official gazette. Another very important, very important aspect, and that has to be taken care by the Board of Trustees of the Major Port. We have heard the word lien now, even before, and just for us to refresh our memories, lien is basically the possession of the property that is taken until whatever debt the person has to repay has been repaid or not. So, very simple example, you have bought a house and you have taken loan from the bank. Until you have repaid the entire loan, there is a lien marked on your flat, that is, you're not able to sell it, dispose it, or do anything without the permission of the bank. Okay. Now, lien for freight and other charges. We have been speaking about cargo coming to the ports, and all of that, and we have been speaking about shippers, and we have been speaking about carriers and charterers and all of that. And they're sending goods through sea, carriage of goods act we spoke about. Okay. Now, shipping is a business. Nobody is going to carry the cargo or somebody else's goods for charity. Right? So if a ship is carrying, if a vessel is going to carry the cargo of a shipper, the vessel will expect the shipper to pay an amount which is known as freight. Okay. Now, where the freight is collected, how it is collected, and all that we are going to see in a chapter which is specifically dedicated to freight. But if this freight remains unpaid, okay, then somebody will have the right, okay, to keep the goods and not give away the goods to the consignee. So that is what we are going to speak about here. In case if freight or other charges are not paid, the board authority will have the right to keep the goods in their possession until these charges are paid. So what are some of the provisions? Let us have a look at. Board's responsibility to store the goods safely and hand them over to the consignee on presentation of documents and payment of charges. When will the board hand over the property to the consignee? Only when he presents proper documents and when he pays the amount of charges. The ship owner or agent can give notice in writing to the board that goods are to be delivered only after payment of the freight. Okay, because there's a possibility that the shipper has already paid the ship owner or his agent, and freight need not be collected from the consignee. But there's also a possibility that the ship owner does not pay the charges. It is the consignee who is going to pay the charges. Now, this is between the consignor and the consignee to decide who is going to pay the charges. It should be acceptable either ways by the shipping company. This notice should be given before the goods are landed. Once the goods are landed and they're given over to the consignee, then the consignor or the shipper cannot crib that, why was it? So the notice has to reach before the delivery of the goods, before the goods are landed. Okay. The ship owner or agent will have lien for freight over the goods. So if freight is not paid, the ship owner or the agent can mark a lien on those goods and is completely okay if they do not part the possession of the goods. The lien will be to the extent of amount mentioned in the written notice. The board has lien for rates in respect of any goods and may seize or detain the same until such rates are fully paid. Okay, somebody will claim, the consignee will claim, they will say that we have paid the rates, but the rates are paid only partial. In that case also, the lien is there and the board of trustees are responsible for keeping the goods in their possession. Such lien will have priority over all other liens and claims except for general average or for shippers' lien for freight. Ship owners' lien for freight. Now there are different types of liens that are created in maritime law. We are going to look at, there's a separate chapter on maritime lien also, which is there. So we are going to address this. What is a priority lien? Why is a priority lien given? Yeah, all that is there. Now what happens is, just to give you a quick, brief example, explanation on that. So we have read over here, the lien will be to the extent of amount mentioned in the written notice, and the board has lien for rates in respect of any goods and may seize and detain the same until such rates are paid. Okay. So whatever amount is mentioned, if there are goods worth beyond that, then there is a possibility or that the board of trustees can return back those goods. But and there is an option that is there with the boards also, that so the board has lien for rates in respect of any goods and may seize and detain the same until such rates are fully paid. So they can retain the goods even if the value of the goods is more, but the rate of freight is not paid. Whatever has been prescribed by the board, if it is not mentioned by the ship owners, then also until that entire thing is paid, they will have the right of lien on the goods. Now, priority lien is sometimes what happens is there's a person who is not paid the freight, okay, or paid any charges. He owes certain money, not just to the port authorities or the shippers or whoever. He owns certain money for other things also. That is, he's not paid the consignor or the what you call it, the seller of the goods. So the seller of the goods may say that no, this person, this party has not paid me for selling not paid me the cost of the goods, and therefore I am going to recover all the money, or I am going to take all the goods in my custody, and it cannot lie in the custody of the board of trustees. It cannot happen like that, because the lien for freight has a priority over all other liens. So what the board of trustees will do, the board of trustees will keep goods for the value that they have mentioned as a rate of freight, and may return the rest of the goods to the seller of the goods, because the seller has been unpaid. But the seller will not be able to claim from the board of trustees all the goods for which the value of matches with the freight that the consignee was supposed to pay. Okay, so that is priority. Like I said, maritime lien we're going to speak about as a separate chapter next time. In that we will quickly speak about all these things. Sale or disposal of goods. The board has the right to sell by public auction or in any other manner goods that have passed into its custody if the goods are not claimed or collected by the consignee after the expiry of 2 months from the date when the goods are passed in its custody, or 24 hours in case of animals and perishable and hazardous goods. I think these things are very simple to understand. Don't really need any kind of an explanation. So board has the right to sell the goods. Typically 2 months, in 2 months time, if nobody is going to claim the goods or claim or collected the goods, then after 2 months, the board will have the right to sell it off. But if they are perishable goods or animals, they can sell it off in 24 hours. Before making such sale, the board shall give 10 days notice of the same in the Port Gazette. In case of animals and perishable goods, the notice will be of shorter duration. Notice should be given to the owner of the goods and the consignee if their address is known. Arms and ammunition and controlled goods may be sold at any time and in any manner as the central government may direct. It does not require 2 months, 24 hours, giving notice, not giving notice, anything. The board should give 10 days notice, should also give 10 days notice in the Gazette of the state government and one principal daily newspaper. When they are selling the goods, they'll have to do that. Failure to issue the notice to the importers does not invalidate the sale. So people who are supposed to be taking the consignment, okay? These are the importers of the goods, correct? The goods have been exported. So I'm sending goods from India to China. So I'm exporting my goods to China and China is importing. So whoever is importing the goods, there is no need to send a notice to that person, but the notice has to be given in the in the Gazette of the state government, and also so Gazette is a document basically of the state government, and one principal daily newspaper. Goods once sold, the purchaser's rights to ownership cannot be questioned. Okay, so once the goods are sold to any particular person, he becomes the clear owner of the goods. He has the title of the goods. The possession of the property is passed on to that person. The sales proceed is utilized for meeting these sales expenses, expenses for storing the goods at the port, lien on freight, and payment of customs duty. Surplus, if any, is payable to the importers, provided he or his agent make an application for this purpose within 6 months from the date of the sale. Okay, so it is not that the port authority is going to sell everything and keep all the money to themselves. They are only going to keep the money to the tune of whatever they have expended on this, and rest of the money will be given back to the importer or to the consignee. Surplus, if any, is payable to the importer provided. Yeah, and when it is, if there is any surplus, it is provided to the importers when only if the importer or his agent is making an application for this purpose within 6 months from the date of the sale. Okay, it cannot go on to infinity. When no application is received, the surplus shall be appropriated by the board, when the board has the right to do whatever it wants to do. If the sale proceed is not sufficient to meet the balance of port charges up to the date of sale mentioned, the port can file a suit against the importer for recovery of port charges. Which means that the goods are not of that worth, where the port charges can be recoverable, then they can file a suit against the importer or the consignee. Suit can be filed up to 3 years from the date of sale under the provisions of the Indian Limitation Act. So there's a limitation period given for every act which is improper or not correct. Let us quickly, we still have 10 minutes, maybe 5 more minutes we will take, but let us quickly do the health and health regulations, because that's absolutely very simple and does not really, it may not take too much time, because we have 9 topics more to cover in last one lecture. And some of the topics may take a little longer. So let's please cooperate with me. Maybe we will, have the class will go on for 5 minutes more. Health and health regulations. Every ship entering a port in India from a foreign port must ascertain the health of all personnel on board and must fill and sign a declaration of health. So this is for ships that are entering the ports in India from foreign ports, not that, from Kolkata it has come to Mumbai and there has to be ascertainment of health. Why is this? Because different countries may have different epidemics at different, forget about this pandemic which is there across the world, but epidemics are there. Sometimes there is plague, cholera. Now, of course, plague and cholera is not so much in picture, but there could be other things which are, which probably, things like your yellow fever and all of that, which is there and which could perhaps influenza, which could, perhaps cause health issues to the people in the country where the ships are going to come. So the master of the ship has the duty to report on health conditions of his vessel and also about any circumstances on board which are likely to cause the spread of infectious disease. Okay, it's the master's responsibility to send the report. He must make a report if his ship is not a healthy ship. Infected, suspected, and healthy ship. So what is an infected ship? Has a case of disease subject to international health regulation or other infectious disease where a plague infested rodent is found. What? So clear case, there is somebody who is having some kind of an ailment which is not in accordance with the international health regulation, or there is a plague infested rodent that is found in the ship. The clear case of infected ship. What is a suspected ship? Does not have any case of any disease, but is coming from some infected place where there was cholera or there is evidence of abnormal mortality amongst rodents, the case of which is unknown. Why rodent? See now this act, particularly these things, all these acts have been, ancient acts now, and plague, cholera was some of the things that were very, very, very sort of, prevailing in different parts of the world at that point of time. And plague comes from your rodents and infected rats. Okay, so any ship which is not having any ailment, but it is coming from a place which was infected by cholera or plague, then definitely it becomes a suspected ship, because there's a possibility that there would be some passengers on the ship, or there would be rats on the, if there are rats on the ship, those rats may have the possibility of spreading some kind of infection. And healthy ship is a ship where there is neither anybody who is infected or there is nothing that you can suspect. So the ship that is a healthy ship will be given something known as certificate of free traffic. A certificate issued by the Port Health Authority that the ship is without infectious disease or plague on board and therefore permitted to enter the port and allow people to board and disembark from the vessel. So where free traffic has been granted, there the cargo and the people will be allowed to disembark from the vessel. Free traffic can be obtained by radio, and it is called radio free traffic. Technology, so much when the ship is approaching the port itself, the ship can take the certificate of free traffic on by radio frequency. After the vessel arrives, the master is required to fill up the maritime declaration of health. If answers to all questions are negative in that declaration, the ship is assigned a berth at the port. Okay? If the answers to any question is in affirmative, then the boat is taken to a quarantine anchorage. Now, for an aeroplane, it is a hangar, and for a ship, it's an anchor. Okay. So there is a declaration. In that declaration, if even one question is yes, because the declaration says that nobody is infected, nobody has plague, nobody has cholera, nobody showed any symptoms and all that. So it is that way. And if any of these answers is yes, then the boat is not going to get berth, but it will be taken straight to the quarantine anchorage. So I was speaking about the rules for every act. So the Indian Port Health Act also has Indian Port Health rules, and these rules were framed in 1955. I think the Indian Port Health Act is also of 1955. It's also of 1955. We'll have to clarify that. Okay. So certain rules of this act which are important, we're only going to see that. The health officer may inspect the vessel on arrival or already in the port. Then there are signals of free traffic. There are 4 different types of signals that are shown by the flag. So flag signal, if there's a Q, the vessel is healthy and requests free traffic. If it is QQ, it is the vessel is So if the vessel is infected, flag QQ should be displayed in the daytime, and QL is displayed in the night time. Red light over a white light is I have no free traffic. Okay, this is how the port authorities will identify whether to give a berth to the vessel or it should be taken to the quarantine anchorage. No ship can bring to India any person who has been in a yellow fever infected area within 9 days of embarkment unless such person is vaccinated against yellow fever. Explanation to all this has become so simple now because of your pandemic, because of your coronavirus, whatever 19 and now Omicron and whatever crons are coming. We all know how it works. No, you're not allowed to. Even if you go to the country, you will be quarantined somewhere if you've not completed that prescribed number of days after you were infected and all of that. Similar things are there in the Indian Port Health rules also. De-ratting certification and de-ratting exemption certificate is also one of the rules. De-ratting is rats, to avoid rats on the ship. Every ship should be periodically de-ratted or permanently kept in such condition that the number of rodents on board are negligible. So ships will contain rodents because it carries cargo. It is like it's on the sea in high seas for a very long time, and also there is a possibility that there are rodents and the rodents are multiplied. But every ship should be periodically de-ratted and permanently kept in such a condition. And permanently kept in such a condition that the number of rodents are on board are negligible. No ship is allowed to sail for a foreign port without being in possession of a de-ratting certificate or a de-ratting exemption certificate. There is either the ship vessel has a de-ratting certificate saying that we have de-ratted, or there has to be a de-ratting exemption certificate, which means that particular vessel does not require de-ratting because the chances of it having rodents is less. The validity of the certificate is for 6 months only. Departing vessels, all passengers embarking on a vessel leaving Indian ports for any port outside India should go through a medical examination by the health officer. Time and date for the same will be fixed by the medical officer. The officer will give a certificate of medical inspection. Yes, with that, we come to an end of the. Okay. Thank you for this. Thank you for this. De-ratting certificate is now called ship sanitization certificate. Okay, so please make note of that, everybody. And yes, I will also make note of that in my notes. Next time we have to cover 8 topics, and we'll also have to do a little bit of chat on our what? Very important topic. That is your examination, how to crack it. Ship sanitation certificate. Okay. So anything needs to be discussed? Any questions anybody has? Otherwise, we can wind up the class. We have finished.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Who is that?
Ma'am, my name is Umang. I want to ask one question.
Bolo.
Ma'am, like Hague rules, as you said, were incorporated into Indian COGSA. So
No,
my question.
I can't hear you at all. Your voice is not clear at all. Talk a little louder or type your question. Anybody else? Any questions? Anything that needs to be addressed? Otherwise, we can close the class. And there was this one person who's I have already put in my apology in the chat because I don't know, I have just lost your, I can't remember her name. I have just lost, that question was something related to consideration. That is also some, I remember, but I can't remember the exact question, and I can't remember who this girl was who had asked. So request you to kindly put your question again in the
Madam, would you like me to retrieve the chat from the last lecture? Irfan, this is Irfan.
Yes, Irfan, I didn't get you. What are you saying?
You want me to retrieve the chat of the last lecture?
No, that was not in the chat. It was in my WhatsApp. That girl.
Okay, your inbox.
Yeah. Why we did not make rules is not something that I can really answer. It is only the government who will be able to answer why they have not made any rules specifically. There are so many things actually. There are so many acts, so many times, Also, what happens is Umang, that bills are drafted for them to become an act, but they just remain as a bill and they don't become an act. And I don't know whether for Indian COGSA also something like that had happened, but perhaps they felt that it was not really necessary with all the protocols with all the conventions that kept happening after the Hague rules in 1924. Then the Hague vis-a-vis rules and the Brussels Protocol. They perhaps felt that the need is met and there was no necessity to make another act. So this is a question that typically I will not be able to answer. It will only be the government who will be able to tell us, or the shipping ministry who will be able to tell us why they're not doing it. Yes. So can we wind up? Thank you so much. And I don't know when I will be allotted the next class, but yes, we have to still do a lot of portion, that is about 8 topics. But yes, those topics are not really very vast, small ones which we can do. And you'll all have my number. If there is any difficulty, please reach me on WhatsApp and we'll see. Apologies if I have missed on any query. Request you to put it again so that I can address it. Thank you. Have a lovely Sunday ahead.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.